The rise in toxins seems to coincide with the rise in chronic disease. When I started to look into Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, kidney disease, heart disease, Hashimoto's, every single one of them had a connection to toxicity. So believe it or not, there's even toxins that actually aren't chemicals. So something like X-ray radiation could be considered a toxin. So there are other theories of cancer out there. Those involve the idea that something damages the cell, and then once the cell gets damaged, it becomes selfish and wants to grow uncontrollably. And you could postulate that the something is the toxin. The chemo itself is toxic. And in fact, whenever I asked AI to make a table of toxins and rank them by how much tissue damage they cause, chemotherapy was actually at the top of the list.
Have you ever seen a Western hospital biopsy tumor and return with a toxicology report?
You're listening to The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey.
So what would happen if a biochemist and a chemist and expert in quantum computers had a love child? Well, pretty much that's who's sitting across from me today. All three of those in one human being, although I have no idea if he's a love child or not. Ph.D. in chemical engineering from UC Berkeley, a master's of philosophy in biochemistry from a little school called Cambridge. And actually, my son's at Oxford right now, so he'll be angry. He's not going to Oxford. He's at summer camp at Oxford, but still. Sister school, I think. No competition there, right?
Yeah.
And you're also the chief scientist at Normal Computing, and you're building quantum computing chips. So you're kind of a smart guy.
I try. Yeah, so we're building chips for AI right now. And I will say that I recently switched from quantum computing to thermodynamic computing, just a slight. They're both physics-based computing.
Sweet. Okay.
But nevertheless, yeah, we're basically making chips for AI.
You also worked for Los Alamos National Labs. Did you live in Los Alamos?
I did, yeah.
Sweet. So I used to spend my my Christmases and my holidays in Los Alamos because my grandparents met on the Manhattan Project.
Wow.
So that's why I'm from New Mexico. Is Los Alamos? Yeah.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
So this is, if you guys don't know about Los Alamos, this is the secret city that was made during World War II so that they could figure out a bunch of skunk works projects, including at first the nuclear bomb, and then later a lot of the nuclear energy came out of research there, along with a lot of biochemistry stuff. So I have many family members in the national labs. My dad worked for another national lab. So this is like the government think tank of stuff that, for all I know, that's probably where they make the UFOs, is at Los Alamos. They just manufacture them. Were you on that project?
I'm not allowed to comment on that. Yeah.
Well, Stephen Greer told me you were. Okay. He was on the show last week. He was one of those alien guys. I'm just kidding about that stuff.
Yeah.
People always say that.
Right.
So you're here, though, to talk about something that I am a huge fan of. And has nothing to do with any of those three things. Well, maybe a little bit with the chemistry and biochemistry. And it's toxin sequestration theory. And this is something that I've seen pop up in the world of health since the late 90s. When I started running a longevity nonprofit, we'd have these guys, usually after decades of working as clinicians or researchers, say, well, if I look inside body fat, there's all these toxins, right? Or I look inside different abnormal growths, including the big C. There's stuff in there. And you have some interesting theories about this that you've been sharing pretty widely. So, in fact, I probably should say this. I talked about all the cool stuff you've done. I never said Patrick Coles. So, Patrick, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Well, the name is the least important part of things.
Oh,
yeah.
Still,
yeah.
That was me getting all excited about the nerd stuff. So toxins. Like, what is your perspective on these? What's different?
Yeah, and there's many theories out there of what is driving the chronic disease epidemic. We all know that chronic disease has risen dramatically in the past century. And, people talk about bacteria, viruses, parasites, but I would argue, if anything, those might actually be going down over time because people are more sanitary now than they've ever been. They're wiping down surfaces, they're using hand sanitizers. And yet chronic disease is still continuing to go up. And I think the one thing that people can agree is going up are the number of toxins that we're exposed to. And that seems to just coincide, the rise in toxins seems to coincide with the rise in chronic disease. And there is good reason to believe that toxins are the root cause of disease. They do produce oxidative damage to the body. That is kind of like the unifying feature of toxins, and that view agrees with a doctor named Thomas Levy. He wrote a book called The Only Cause of Disease, where he highlighted toxin-induced oxidative damage.
I love his work. Okay.
Yeah, as a key driver of disease. And so I came at this and independently discovered that toxins were driving disease. And then I found his work and I realized, oh, he had discovered it before I did. And but in any case, when I started to look into Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, kidney disease, heart disease, Hashimoto's, every single one of them had a connection to toxicity.
Damn straight.
Yeah. And it was very surprising that every time I looked in the literature, I was always seeing toxins show up for every single disease. And so it's very clear that toxins play a key role in disease. And, the body, should be very scared of toxins, and it is. And I think what toxin sequestration theory is about is describing how the body fights back against toxins. It's the body's defense strategy against toxins. So that is what TST, toxin sequestration theory, is about.
Okay. Now, can you define what a toxin is? I mean, isn't water a toxin? You drink too much of it, you die?
Yeah, so I think very simply, a toxin is something that causes damage to the body's tissues and organs, right? So that's a very simple, straightforward definition. And then you can go a step further, which is that what is the mechanism, right? So what is the mechanism by which toxins manifest their toxicity?
And what's the dose too?
Right, exactly.
Black pepper is very toxic. We just don't use enough of it to matter, right?
No, that's a great point. And there are certain chemicals that are perfectly fine in low doses and become toxic in high doses. Yeah. It's very common. And so sometimes we have to attach a number to it and say well, above this number, it's a toxin.
Is there a way to talk about toxins that talks about those that accumulate and are hard to eradicate versus things that are harmful in the short term but go away quickly? Because it feels like the persistent toxins are the problem. Because if you have something toxic, like a shot of vodka, it's eliminated the next day. You feel like crap for a day or maybe two, and then you're kind of back in business. Might have some long-term damage, but it's not in you anymore. Versus if you did a shot of mercury, it's going to be there for a while.
Yeah, that indicates that some toxins are more damaging than others, and it can be sort of a repeated source of damage, right, over and over again, and that is true. And of course, it's really a balance of how much damage they create versus how much the damage is sort of repaired. And so, for example, most toxins basically manifest their toxicity through oxidative damage. That's what I mentioned before. And so there's these free radicals that the toxins create called reactive oxidant species. And then those basically burn the body from the inside out. So these, they rust the body or burn the body. And, just like how holding your hand over a flame would damage your body externally, this same process happens internally with toxins. And but then we can sort of rank toxins by how much oxidative damage do they cause. Okay. And like you said, how long do they do it for? How persistent are they? And then conversely, how much can our antioxidant defenses, glutathione, et cetera, kind of fight back? And then there's some toxins that would manifest their toxicity also by weakening our antioxidant defenses.
A lot of the worst ones do that, right?
Right.
Okay. So, the whole kind of basic biohacking algorithm from the first couple of blog posts is consume less toxins from all sources, make less toxins internally, right? And that would be step one. And after that, you should eat highly nutritious food. But most nutrition advice is, well, eat this because it has vitamin C. You're like, it has cyanide, dude. And we don't care. It has vitamin C. Like the whole vegan proposition is ignore toxins and because it has, some plant thing. I'm not opposed to plants. Oregano is a good plant, but I don't think kale is, right? Because of the toxin thing. are there categories for toxins that you think about? Like, do you bucket them in some certain way?
Yeah, good question. So believe it or not, there's even toxins that actually aren't chemicals. So something like X-ray radiation could be considered a toxin. The way that X-rays manifest their toxicity is once again by creating oxidative damage.
Yeah.
And they actually rip water molecules apart. It's called ionizing radiation, right? So where they rip them apart and create those free radicals just by ripping water apart. And so it's fascinating that X-rays do the exact same thing as these chemical toxins. What I find beautiful is almost the fact that we don't have to classify things. The fact that there is a unifying picture for every toxin, I find to be very beautiful. It's very common for us to kind of impose our human labels on toxins and say, oh, those are plant toxins, those are metal toxins, that's radiation. But what's beautiful is that the toxicity theory has a unifying underlying mechanism. So I like kind of...
How does it work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can go, like I said, the end result is always producing reactive oxygen species, which are these small oxygen containing molecules, the most dangerous of which is the hydroxyl radical. It's literally just OH. It's not OH minus. So some people might think, oh, that's just the, hydroxide anion, but that's not it. It's the OH with a free radical. So anyway, that's the most dangerous. And then there's a couple other ones, like the superoxide, which is like an oxygen molecule with an extra electron.
Peroxynitride.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the final mechanism by which toxins, manifest their toxicity. They create the reactive oxygen species, and then those reactive oxygen species react with everything. The reactive is in their name, of course. So they literally react with anything in their path. So they'll react with proteins, lipids, DNA, mitochondria. They'll just damage everything. And it's indiscriminate, right? So it's just whatever they hit first, they react with. And then the idea is that once they do oxidize these biomolecules, those biomolecules have effectively lost their ability to function properly. And now you have these basically garbage molecules that are just floating around and can't function biologically. And that's what we call tissue damage, right? Tissue damage is whenever you just have kind of like dead tissue. But each toxin has, like, say, a different way that it can create the reactive oxygen species.
Right.
That's where the subtlety comes in. A lot of times it happens in the mitochondria, for example. They'll interfere with like the electron transport chain, because the electron transport chain involves handing electrons off to oxygen, and that process can produce reactive oxygen species. So sometimes it's like interfering with the mitochondria. That's an example. But yeah.
All right, so how does the sequestration theory work? Because we all, I think, recognize that there are a lot of toxins out there, and a lot of people have heard of free radicals, right? And so this is a way, even exercise can create too many free radicals, and too many is more than your body can handle with its natural antioxidant defenses, or with the antioxidants you add to the system via things like, coffee or vitamin C, or any of the antioxidants, things like that. So if the body's overwhelmed with toxins and therefore overwhelmed with reactive oxygen, what happens?
Yeah. And so I mentioned all these other diseases, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Those are real tissue damaging diseases where these reactive oxygen species are actually damaging tissues. But cancer, on the other hand, looks like the oddball. And my broader theory and toxin sequestration theory says that the body is basically brilliant, amazing, and strategic. And anytime it builds extra tissue, it is doing it for a very good reason.
Yes,
and,
thank you.
It doesn't just waste the steak that you ate on some frivolous purpose. It uses the nutrition for some very good reason. And so in the case of cancer, TST, my theory, is interpreting cancer tumors actually not as selfish, malignant, uncontrolled growth as they are presented in the mainstream, but rather interpreting them as extra tissue that the body creates on purpose in order to sequester, store, and process toxins in order to protect the normal tissue from the toxic effects. And in other words, we can think of a cancer tumor as a backup detox organ.
Wow, that's going to piss off some cancer doctors.
And there is a lot of money in this. And so naturally, it does seem like out of all the reason I'm so interested in cancer, I would say, is because it seems like the disease that has been most mischaracterized, I would say, out of any other condition.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your theory is that there's more toxins than the body can handle. The body says, well, I can't put them in the brain. That's already full of mercury. I can't put them in the liver. It's already overtaxed. I guess I'll form a little reservoir somewhere full of malignant growths that I can use to stuff a bunch of toxins in.
That's right. And I'll point out that I'm not the first person to come up with this idea. Believe it or not, it dates back 2,000 years to traditional Chinese medicine. It appears in these ancient Chinese texts. And then more recently, there's been Western thinkers, Agenus von der Planets in the 1990s.
God, that guy's nuts.
Right.
Yeah.
But, he wrote a book on this, and he had cancer, but he.
Yeah, and just for reference, guys, this is a guy who recommended fermented raw meat. And I was a raw carnivore for a while in the early odds, like 2001. I didn't ferment the meat. It just made me too sick because of histamine. But yeah, this was the guy who was writing about that a lot and just saying, you expose yourself to it enough, you'll be tough. But yeah, he was maybe one of the early carnivore-like people, but
right,
it was rough.
Yeah, I don't do the whole fermented meat thing. But nevertheless, he had the basic idea. He had cancer himself. And then he said that by going on this raw carnivore thing, it healed things.
It would work better if he didn't spoil the meat first. I just have to say.
Right. Agreed. Yeah. And anyway, so he was one of the early Western thinkers that had this viewpoint that cancer was not a disease, rather it's a defense mechanism. More recently, there's been Tom Cowan. And he basically refers to cancer as bagging up the garbage.
Yeah.
In his words.
He's got a point.
Yeah. And then even more recently, Stephanie Seneff.
I love her.
Yeah. So she's an MIT senior researcher, and she has a deep knowledge of biochemistry. She goes very deep on things, and she mapped out this mechanism for the case of the deuterium toxin. So deuterium is heavy hydrogen, and it does act as a toxin. And she laid out in dramatic detail how cancer cells sequester and hoard deuterium, and even actually export deuterium-depleted nutrients to their surroundings to help the body. And it was her work that actually inspired me to look into this.
So this is fascinating stuff because Stephanie's been on the show, and we had a beautiful conversation about glyphosate and heparin and all kinds of things. And I have a lot of respect for her work. And I got into the deuterium thing maybe 2012. And I spent $10,000 on deuterium depleted water, went on a low deuterium diet. And my conclusion after all this was, unless you're a billionaire with cancer, deuterium is one of those things that's almost impossible to move. And then there's a few fringe people out there who are like, everything is deuterium. But that's the person I'm talking about. I'm not going to name him by name just because it's,
right.
There's no need to
I think I
throw
know,
crap.
But
But it's like before that was everything is a blue light irradiated world and we're all gonna die. And it's like it's just a weird, like overly complex vibe. Deuterium is about 160 million or 160 parts per million in normal water. My belief is that deuterium arrived on the planet with a comet that hit about 11,000 years ago. Graham Hancock came on the show because we find a lot of that in comets. And since then, the average lifespan has declined very substantially. If you believe that Noah lived this long and Methuselah was 969 years, every X number of years, it seems like our lifespan's going down if you believe ancient writings. So maybe deuterium caused all that, but maybe something else. But you really can't do much about deuterium other than never eat a carb again and only eat grass-fed animal fat. So who cares?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's all on a continuum. And deuterium is one of many, many toxins.
Yeah.
I mean, there's toxic metals, all the heavy metals. There's all the forever chemicals, microplastics. There's cigarette smoke. So there's really quite a long list of toxins that people have to worry about.
It is of note, though, that deuterium clearly negatively affects mitochondria. So cancer cells are taking the negative stuff and holding on to it and sending out things that allow mitochondria around it to heal. Okay. I would bless Stephanie's work because she's damn smart. Right. So Okay, so deuterium handling is a part of toxin sequestration, but it's not the core, right?
What I just want to say is that's what inspired me
Okay.
to look into this. And, she laid out the mechanism in such detail, and it was so convincing that I thought, well, what if it's not just deuterium, right? What if it's
everything?
Yeah.
Now we're onto something.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
And, I had heard, some other people, I heard another podcaster, his name was Garrett Smith, and he basically had a line in his podcast where he said that cancer cells hoard heavy metals.
Oh, absolutely. In biopsies, heavy metals, mold toxins, pesticides, way overrepresented, like crazy amounts. Okay, that's real.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in probably 10 sources. Okay.
Right.
So you've got all this in your data set. Okay. So you're saying any kind of toxin.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I just went down the list.
Okay.
I do, I was, since I do eat a very meat-based diet, I was well aware of plant toxins like oxalate. So that was the one that I just tested. And I know you're dealing with oxalates and worried about that. But yeah, so I decided to just check. I was like, okay, well, let me just look up. First of all, do oxalates create reactive oxygen species? Yes, they do. So that means that they are, in fact, like a toxin under the strict definition. And then are oxalates preferentially stored in cancer cells?
Damn straight.
And there is a medical paper that's called Oxalates Induce Breast Cancer.
Boom.
And
you know about this. I love you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that paper tested the oxalate levels inside of normal breast tissue and inside of breast tumor tissue. And they found elevated levels of oxalate in every single breast tumor tissue sample that they tested. Every single one. Yeah. And sometimes they even found 10 times higher oxalate concentration inside of the tumor tissue relative to normal breast tissue.
So the question is, did oxalate cause the cancer, or does just oxalate stick to any inflamed site in the body? I think it's both. What do you think?
So that gets into the interesting question. So there are other theories of cancer out there. There's the mainstream genetic theory of cancer. There's Thomas Seyfried's metabolic theory of cancer. Both of those involve the idea that something damages the cell, and then once the cell gets damaged, it becomes selfish and wants to grow uncontrollably. And you could postulate that the something is the toxin, right? So, and in the mainstream theory, the toxin would damage the DNA. In Seyfried's theory, the toxin would damage the mitochondria. But both of them involve basically, the toxins kind of by accident got into cells, and then they damaged something and then triggered a selfish, growth. And whereas in my theory and Stephanie Seneff's theory, we're saying that the toxins do not get in by accident. They are pulled in with the tractor beam. Wow. They are actually intentionally hoarded and pulled in by cancer cells. And then the cells that are cancerous are not actually damaged. They're fully functional. It's just that, for example, in the case of Seyfried's theory, we would push back and say that the mitochondria could be used, but they're just downregulated. And so it's a choice rather than the damage thing. So, but I want to get back to the first point, which is that do the toxins get in by accident or are they pulled in? And that's where I think we can really differentiate between the theories, because the standard theory, the genetic theory and Seyfried's theory would argue, the toxins just got in by accident. But what we see is that's not what's happening. So,
are you comfortable just taking the genetic theory of cancer off the list? It's just proven bullshit at this point. Like I've interviewed enough cancer experts. People are actually curing cancer versus just cutting it out. And there are not common genes. Every cancer is genetically unique. Thomas Cowan does a great job of just shooting holes in that in his book, Cancer and the New Biology of Water. Or maybe it's just Biology of Water. But I just to say that cancer is genetic at this point, and 10 years ago, maybe we thought that, but it's almost all the other theories here. I mean, do you agree with that?
I fully agree with that.
Okay.
People like Thomas Seyfried have really laid out this argument in detail. He's talked about the nuclear transfer experiments, which were experiments in the 1980s that essentially debunked the genetic theory. They showed that the genetic material was not the cause of cancer by basically transferring the damaged DNA that cancer cells have into normal cells. You would expect the normal cells to become cancerous if the DNA was the cause, but they did not become cancerous. They stayed normal. So I'm fully fine with kind of eliminating that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So now we have a metabolic picture of it, and we have a toxin sequestration are really the two that are left.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And, and I think Savory has done amazing work to really highlight the key role of diet in cancer and how diet plays such a crucial role. And believe it or not, in my theory, diet plays a key role as well.
Shocking.
So because there's so many toxins that are dietary, and ultimately, in my theory, you want to basically go for the lowest toxin diet you can possibly go for. And we can go down that.
Wow, we're so aligned.
Yeah. Right. And, and this does get into interesting differences between my view and the view of the metabolic theory, which is that, for example, in the metabolic theory, it's a little bit more about ketosis and, trying to trigger a certain type of metabolism. Whereas in my theory, it's like, just go for the lowest toxin diet you can possibly get.
Man.
Yeah.
It's like chapter 1 of the Bulletproof Diet. I'm like, here's the 5 types of toxins you should avoid before you decide what to eat. My God. So
yeah,
I'm loving what you're saying. I'm realizing that we forgot one of the categories of cancer, which would be fungal infections that are identified as cancer. Like some of the sac tumors are, you can see the fungal origins of those. It's a minority of cancer cases, but those respond very well to antifungal therapy, strangely. So I would add that as a little asterisk in our conversation there.
Yep.
I don't know if you've seen like fungal bionics or any of that kind of work.
So my understanding is that there is a fungal theory of cancer. There's also a parasite theory of cancer. These are very popular in alternative medicine. I'm aware of a researcher named Mark Lintern who actually has a fungal theory of cancer. He calls it cellular suppression theory, I think.
Yeah.
And
it's not all cancer, I'm saying. I'm saying most of the time it's what you're talking about or possibly metabolic. And some of the time it's literally just a fungal infection. And we know that fungus makes a toxin that would fit in your toxin sequestration theory. And that's much more common. When I see a sac fungus that easily spreads, you're like, have you tried taking some antifungals? Like itraconazole might cure your cancer. And then it does in those rare cases. But most of the time it's not genetic, even though you might be able to do a specific gene edited vaccination for what's going on with you that can still work even though it's not caused by genetics. You can target it with genetics. That's important to point out for listeners as well.
And this does go back to the beginning of our conversation where we were talking about what are the root causes of disease. And like I said, there is a common phenomenon where people like to blame microorganisms like funguses, parasites, bacteria, and viruses. However, we could alternatively point to the fact that some of these microorganisms do produce toxins.
Exactly.
Right?
The bacteria aren't the problem. It's the toxins, the lipopolysaccharides from the bacteria that really, otherwise you wouldn't get sick if it was just E. coli that didn't make toxins. They just sit there and eat your sugar or something.
Right, exactly. So it's not the physical presence of the microorganism. It's the fact that many of these do produce toxins. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's my perspective. And mycotoxins are the mold toxins. Those are the fungal toxins. And those, believe it or not, fit in perfectly into my theory.
Very much.
They have actually studied how much mycotoxins are in cancer cells, and they found mycotoxins at higher levels inside of cancer cells, suggesting that the cancer cells are kind of hoarding the mycotoxins. So
they're basically garbage dump organs that form. But then they kill you, and garbage dumps aren't supposed to kill you. What's going on with that?
That is a great question, and that's the common question that I usually get. And what I would just say is that, I don't fully trust the explanations that were given by mainstream medicine for, say, causes of death.
I can't imagine why.
It's well documented that sometimes the cause of death might be mislabeled. So in the case of cancer, it is a situation where people do have toxic overload. So I basically think of cancer not as a disease, but as a symptom of toxic overload. And toxic overload is a very serious situation. So I don't want to downplay the seriousness of cancer. If you do have a tumor, that's a sign that you do have a lot of toxins in your body. And so you're in a precarious situation. You have a lot of toxins, and your body is trying to defend itself by sequestering and storing those toxins in the tumor. So now, however, whenever people do get a cancer diagnosis, it's very common for people to get treatment. And, I'll flag that this will be a controversial statement, but some of the treatments in mainstream medicine do behave as toxins, in my theory. And so
it wasn't even controversial. Most chemotherapy drugs they're so toxic that you have to not have anyone else pee after you because of course they're toxic.
Right.
Every week someone asks me, what's the best peptide? There isn't one. Peptides are signals. Different peptides send different instructions to your body. Some affect metabolism, some are for tissue repair, others influence your brain, recovery, or aging pathways. The right peptide depends on what you're trying to change and what the research shows. My new peptide guide explains what the major peptides do, where the evidence is strong, and what to know if you're just getting started. Whether you're a peptide veteran or a total newbie, there's something for you. Download it free at daveasprey.com/peptide-guide.
Your gut decides how much you get from everything else you do. You can eat the best food. You can take the best supplements. I sure do. You can train every day. That's probably not a good idea, but you could do it anyway. But if your gut isn't working well, your body isn't going to get the full benefit. And that's why I've used Just Thrive probiotics literally for years. Almost every probiotic dies in your stomach before it reaches your gut. Just Thrive has 4 different spore-based strains that get into your body 100% alive. And one of those strains you probably haven't heard of is called Bacillus indicus HU36. Say that 3 times fast. It turns your gut into an antioxidant-producing factory. So when your gut works better, you can absorb more nutrients. Then your digestion improves. You don't get bloated as much, and your immune system gets stronger. And then all the other supplements that you invest in start working better. So right now, you can start a 90-day Just Thrive probiotic subscription, and they'll send you a free 90-day supply of digestive bitters. You take these before meals to help your body make more stomach acid, bile, and natural enzymes. And they also support your body's natural GLP-1 production, which is a lot cheaper than injecting them, right? Go to justthrivehealth.com/Asprey, and if you don't love the results, they'll refund your money even if your bottle is empty.
Yeah. And in fact, whenever I asked AI to make a table of toxins and rank them by how much tissue damage they cause, chemotherapy was actually at the top of the list. So it was more dangerous than cigarette smoke, than microplastics or drinking alcohol. So anyway, now let's think about what the strategy is for what mainstream medicine does here. So the strategy is that they view cancer cells as vulnerable because, after all, cancer cells are completely full of toxins. So they're in a precarious situation. The cancer cells are packed full of toxins, and mainstream medicine says, well, what if we just add more toxins to the mix? And that will kind of push the cancer cells over the edge and force them to burst, apoptosis, and die. And now, of course, in the process, it will damage some normal cells. But their viewpoint is, as long as we kill the cancer cells, then we've accomplished our goal. So, but from my theory's view, what is going on here? So from my theory's view, what's happening is that when you do something like chemo, then first of all, the chemo itself is a toxin, so that can directly damage the body's tissues and add to the toxic burden that the body has to manage. But then now you've burst open the cancer tumor, right? You've killed the cancer cells by overwhelming them with toxins, and you've released all the microplastics, the forever chemicals, the seed oils, the heavy metals, and you've released that all back into circulation.
All at once, too. Nice.
Right.
Yeah, basically you aerosolize the dump and just put it everywhere.
Right.
Good idea.
And so it's a double whammy because the chemo itself is toxic, but then now you've released the stored toxins as well. And so you've created a situation of additional toxic overload in your body. And then it's not a surprise then why prognosis tends to be quite bad in these situations, and oftentimes people die.
So what are we supposed to do? We got a growing garbage dump that's probably going to kill you, and if you blow up the garbage dump, it's probably going to kill you.
Yeah. So just to state my theory's view is that when people die of cancer, they die of toxic overload, not of the tumor. And because that's why I sort of prefaced the idea that toxins are the root cause of all disease. They cause Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, kidney disease, everything. Yeah. So if toxins are the root cause of disease and cancer is a case of toxic overload, that does mean that people are very close to getting a lot of diseases whenever they have cancer. And the cancer is kind of like the final wall kind of protecting people from getting the disease. And I know that sounds strange to think of cancer as like a defense mechanism, but I have heard a clinician say that she has some patients that have brain tumors and other patients that have Alzheimer's, but never both. And so that was really interesting because it was suggesting that the cancer tumor in the brain was protecting against Alzheimer's, preventing Alzheimer's from happening. And so that's the basic idea of my theory, which is that cancer is a defense mechanism preventing you from getting a real disease, like Alzheimer's, for example. And so the point is that in my theory, there is a phenomenon called spontaneous tumor regression, STR. This is documented in the medical literature, and it's basically patients who receive the cancer diagnosis, and instead of doing conventional treatment, they opted out. They basically abstained. And what they did is they went on like a low toxin diet and a low toxin lifestyle and lowered their stress levels, just lived like a relaxing, low toxin life. And there's hundreds of documented case studies where those people witnessed their tumors either regress or fully disappear. And that's in the medical literature. And that is the type of approach that would be consistent with my theory, because it would suggest that the tumor is there for a reason. The body has it there for a reason. It's basically like a backup detox organ. And if you lower the toxic burden that the body's exposed to, then the body says, oh, I don't need this toxin storage vault anymore.
Breaks it down.
And I can decommission it. Yeah, exactly. So that's the idea.
It's possible that the correct theory is two of the theories too, or three. I absolutely. I mean,
I'm obviously biased, but yes.
Yeah. I don't know that we have any evidence that it's just one. Like I have a friend who had stage 1 breast cancer, biopsy diagnosed. So it helped her out. Of course, low toxin. Sadly, she went vegan, which was probably the wrong thing because of toxins. But we did some other things, high intensity infrared, which is very powerful metabolically. And when she went in for the surgery to remove it, it was gone in 6 weeks.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Like we couldn't find it. So we took everything out around the markers, but there's no tumor there anymore. I think that was metabolic, not toxin. But I've also seen toxin reduction exactly like I think. So I'm trying to create the balance there. And the hardest things like autism, toxins are a clear cause of autism, but it sure happens a lot more if you have certain genes that make you susceptible to toxins. So it's like, is the cause the toxins? Because this level of toxins doesn't make this person sick, and this level of toxin makes this person sick. It's a combination of toxins, different types of toxins, and the individual system where the system gets overwhelmed by the toxins, and some systems are easy to overwhelm. Right. So I always like, if we assume it's one cause,
right?
This theory though holds a lot of water, and it turns out for longevity, eating less toxins is probably a good idea too, right?
Yeah, you'd think. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point, and I will have to look into this. So you said it was infrared therapy, and so
Thomas Cowan's latest book about cancer talks about that kind of stuff.
Okay, no, that's a great point, and I'll look into that more. Naturally, the theory is still, I would say, work in progress in the sense that I'm still trying to incorporate things in. So just examples are that I'm extending it beyond cancer, and we can dive into that. But there's a lot of things that are subtly related to toxins, but not obviously related to toxins. So like,
man, you're making me so happy talking about this. We need more voices saying, yes, it's the toxins. Okay. Tell me more. Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously the X-rays are a good example. We're like, oh, surely an X-ray isn't a toxin, but then it has the same underlying mechanism, right? So it'll be interesting. I'm trying to, same with say, radio waves, right? So radio waves, even though they're not ionizing, they do create oxidative stress as well. So
it doesn't exercise create oxidative stress too.
But it's the balance, of course, between what the body can adapt to, of course, right?
Ooh, that's an improved definition. Toxin, anything that makes a reactive oxygen species in excess of the body's ability to deal with them at the time.
Right. Yes,
okay.
Exactly. And and I want to make this theory more quantitative and look at basically how much you generate ROS and how much they're depleted by the body's natural defenses. So eventually I'll make it more quantitative. But
I love this.
Yeah. So anyway, But the crazy thing about this toxin sequestration theory is I developed it for cancer, but it actually extends way beyond cancer. And I don't think there's any other cancer theory that can also explain things like obesity and skin growths, lipomas and skin tags, and ovarian cysts. And anyway, so the TST more broadly is, how does the body defend itself against toxins? And it doesn't just jump straight to cancer, right? It has basically like a hierarchical response. And so there's like tiers, and like tumors would be like tier 3. Then there's 2 tiers below that. So like at the bottom tier, tier 1, are the primary detox organs, which is the liver and the kidneys, as well as fat tissue. So it creates fat tissue, you mentioned that earlier, to store toxins as well. And that's kind of tier 1. But then tier 2, which is very interesting, are the mini vaults. The mini vaults are the skin growths, so the moles, the cysts, the lipomas, the skin tags, the cherry angiomas, also the nodules, so the thyroid nodules, the lung nodules, also the ovarian cysts and PCOS. So and those are cases where the body is building extra tissue. And, mainstream medicine has a hard time explaining why the body is building extra tissue there, but it fits in perfectly with my theory because these are basically storage vaults for toxins. And, and the body only escalates whenever it has to, whenever the toxic load increases, right? So then we start to get an appreciation for why things like, why are moles connected to cancer, right? We all know that the dermatologists say, check out your moles and make sure that they're not changing color. Why would a mole be related to cancer? But in this theory, they're all on a continuum. It's a hierarchy.
Smart.
Yeah. And so, for example, in the case of moles, they have melanin, and melanin is a metal chelator. And so melanin can chelate all the toxic metals, the mercury, cadmium, lead, arsenic, etc. And sure enough, that is exactly what a mole is.
Wow.
And I grew up my whole life with moles, and I never knew why I had moles. But it turns out that they store toxic metals. And then we can get like a similar interpretation for some of these other skin growths, like lipomas and skin tags, and also the cysts, sebaceous cysts, store lipophilic toxins. These are fat-soluble toxins. And I have a lipoma right now. I've had it for 6 years. Back when I was on the standard American diet, I got it. I was eating a lot of seed oils. And so it turns out that lipomas store seed oils, microplastics, forever chemicals, xenoestrogens, BPA, and phthalates.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm just trying to give the full picture now of TST, my theory, and say that a lot of these things that we think might be unrelated to cancer are in fact very closely. It's all on the hierarchy. It's all on the tiered strategy.
Wow. It's mind-blowing. And I have a very mitochondria-centric view. And that's why I massively avoid toxins, because they all punch your mitochondria in the face, right? So the idea that the body might elegantly and intelligently allow a tumor to form to hold on to toxins so they don't destroy the rest of your mitochondria, not a bad theory at all. And it seems to be what you're seeing in the wild, right?
Yeah. And, what Stephanie Seneff and I argue is that, it is true that some of these toxins will damage the mitochondria. And of course, damaged mitochondria are very bad. It's not a good thing to have. But they actually damage everything. So they damage the DNA, they damage the lipids, the proteins. So they just damage literally everything in their path. And so when we get into the whole underlying microscopic mechanism of cancer and like Seyfried's metabolic theory versus my theory, we do get into the question of like, are the mitochondria damaged or can they actually function? And from Stephanie Seneff's view and my view, we argue that the mitochondria inside of cancer cells are downregulated. They are actually still working. They are functioning, but they are intentionally downregulated. And the reason for that is subtle, but in order to act as a toxin storage vault, you cannot run your mitochondria at full speed, is the idea. And so there are certain toxins like deuterium, Stephanie Seneff's favorite toxin, as well as, basically excess glucose. So I'm not talking about the physiological levels of glucose, but the levels that people get when they're drinking sodas all the time.
Like how many millimoles? Like 150?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the right threshold is there, but basically if someone has diabetes, right? If someone has diabetes,
Okay.
so, and then
Which is a major risk factor for cancer.
yes,
anyway.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So exactly, it is a statistical risk factor for cancer if you have diabetes. And in those cases, people are having hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. And, fascinatingly, the cancer cells are working in the right direction by pulling the sugar out of the blood to try to prevent, hyperglycemia. And so, it's well known that they pull in a lot of glucose. But in any case, we can think of, at least in the case of those two toxins, glucose and deuterium, that the cancer cells are acting as toxin storage vaults or detox units for those two toxins. But if they were to run their standard cellular respiration, with oxidative phosphorylation in the mitochondria, it would actually generate tons of oxidative stress on the body, tons of these reactive oxygen species. So in other words, you can't run the mitochondria at full speed if you're going to have an environment that's very rich in deuterium and very rich in glucose. So you have to kind of turn it down. And that's why we view it as them turning their mitochondria down and instead focusing more on the glycolysis, the fermentation pathway for glucose. Okay. Yeah. So that's obviously a difference. So that is actually a testable difference between the two theories, between our theory and the metabolic theory.
I like this. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, the other thing that, I'll point out is that, so I mentioned glucose as a toxin. I'm referring to the case where basically people do have diabetes. It's well known that there's something called diabetic complications, where diabetics get tissue damage to their retinas, their kidneys, their peripheral nerves, and their arteries. That's a well-known phenomenon. And so this points to the fact that there is medical literature indicating that glucose at very high levels does behave as a toxin. And that is a reinterpretation relative to, say, the metabolic theory. Because the metabolic theory is saying cancer loves glucose so much because it really wants to grow. And I'm flipping the script and saying that cancer loves glucose so much because it wants to help the body detoxify itself. It wants to pull glucose out of the bloodstream to prevent hyperglycemia. And because hyperglycemia is a tissue damaging disease.
Right.
And that would lead to organ damage. So that flips the script and says that at very high levels, once again, I'm not talking about low levels, but I'm talking about very high levels of glucose, then we have a situation where the cancer cells are acting as a detox organ, basically, for the excess glucose. Yeah.
Okay, so you're considering excess glucose as toxic, and I would agree. I'm not sure that zero glucose is the goal either, because
right.
it's typically not sustainable.
Right, I agree.
So what do you actually eat?
So for the past year and a half, I've been on the carnivore diet. Before that, I did 6 months on the keto diet. And before that, I was on the standard American diet. So basically, I've been on this kind of low carb for the past 2 years. And, but yeah, right now I'm carnivore. And so I eat basically 70% beef, 30%, other carnivore foods, whatever, fish, eggs, dairy, pork, that kind of stuff. And yeah, and I did start this journey of getting interested in chronic disease just because I noticed that diet played such a huge role in healing my own issues, healing my kids' issues. My kids had some mental problems, and those seemed to get better on this diet. I had allergies and joint pain, and that got better. So, it's very common, I think, whenever people have this kind of, healing their own health issues with diet, to start to ask questions like why? Like why? Why is it that diet plays such a huge role? And I don't know what your thoughts are.
What about circadian timing? I was just listening to all that. Diet plays a huge role. Excess glucose plays a huge role. But I've seen profound results when people just don't eat when it's dark. How does that fit into your analysis?
That's really interesting. So, do you mind just elaborating? So,
Sure.
Yeah.
So this is probably more metabolic and circadian. So we know that circadian disruption dramatically increases your risk of getting cancer and heart disease and diabetes, and probably diabetes first. This is the work of Sachin Panda down at the Salk Institute. And I went down to his lab and we looked at, rat mitochondria in melanopsin sensors in eyes where there's way more of them. And the idea is that if you're getting bright light at night, especially the blue or the other spectrums we cover with True Dark, it's like green and violet and amber. Like there's a stack of narrow frequencies that tell the central timing clock, hey, it's daytime, right? So if you're trying to go to bed, the central clock says daytime, the organ clocks say it's not. You get a mismatch, you get nutrient maldelivery, you get mitochondrial dysfunction, you get hypoglycemia, you get diabetes. So, and there's pretty good evidence. He wrote a New York Times bestseller a while ago, I'm forgetting its name. But he came on the show and we talked at length about it. So we know night shift workers get diabetes and cancer way more often, and they're getting the light disruption. So when I hear about food, I'm like, okay, eat as little food as you can, but probably eat it when the sun is up. Seems to be an even better cancer strategy, because if you're trying to get a toxic cell that went toxic to conserve energy so it could be a sequestering cell, i.e. tumor, right? Well, let's get less toxins into the system. And one thing that happens is if you stay up late at night is your leaky gut goes up through the roof. Your gut bacteria have their own circadian rhythm, and it also gets disrupted when your body does. So they pump out more lipopolysaccharide, right? So like when someone comes to me and says, I have cancer, I'm like, number one, I'm not a doctor. I don't treat cancer. I can tell you how to have a healthy metabolism, but you really should see a doctor. And the healthy metabolism stuff is very much like you're saying, go on a carnivore diet for a little while. Get some sunshine in the morning and make sure it's dark at night. And that seems to get better results than just the carnivore diet. So I think it's a component, to the point that I have said, blue light below 490 is toxic. Like it's a toxin, and along with the other things in there. We can show it's a skin toxin, it's an eye toxin, it damages melanopsin cells in the brain, and like the list goes on. So I feel like, and also if you look at toxin excretion cycles, glutathione excretion, the glucuronation cycle in the liver, even when the body releases metals, it's not the same in the morning, in the middle of the day, and at night. So if you look at when is the body going to be releasing toxins, it's going to be when you're asleep, right? So then we get better sleep, we get better lymphatic processing, and then the body says, oh, okay, I'm able to increase the rate that I shed my toxins, therefore I can shrink the tumor. So
that makes a lot of sense.
It aligns with what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, that's a beautiful explanation. I admit that I haven't really looked into the whole circadian rhythm thing yet.
It will help your theory, because the timing and rate of toxin sequestration and secretion is based on the light environment and the stress environment to a certain extent. But the light is way bigger than people give it credit for. That's why I'm wearing glasses that block below 490. So.
No, that's super fascinating. And I love the idea that our body would be like detoxifying itself at night or whatever, and like there's sort of a circadian rhythm to the detox process, and you don't want to disrupt that. Yeah.
Are you a fan of the detoxing methods that are out there? And like I had glutathione. I think it's like my third post in the biohacking creation. The very first blog about it was about glutathione and how important it was to get toxins out, because even if you eat no toxins and you breathe no toxins, you still have gut bacteria. So you want healthy glutathione in the liver. And more recently, calcium D-glucarate to raise glucuronation. And then the guys from Broccoli came on and talked about sulfation. And so they make a broccoli extract that has very good data for raising the glutathione inside of cells and the rate of glucuronation. So we're like, okay, we got to get rid of these things. Let's make the transformation of toxins organs better. And then let's just directly stick to them. So activated charcoal, if you go to Whole Foods, there's still bulletproof activated charcoal. I got nothing to do with Bulletproof, guys. It's not my company. They kicked me out and sold it to themselves. So wasn't a win, but Danger Coffee is awesome and has humic and fulvic acid, which, you know about those? They're toxin binders.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
So
Nice.
I'm like, why shouldn't your coffee introduce new minerals
There you go.
and get rid of bad minerals? And they do this by opening the cell membrane so the cell can dump out toxins and they can be escorted out. So, I mean, I'm getting a little bit detailed in my question here, but the point is between activated charcoal and certain types of fiber and clay and these excretion eliminating things, how do they fit into the sequestration model?
Yes,
Are they going to shrink tumors basically?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because it's not necessarily just about getting on a low toxin intake. It's also about getting the toxins out as fast as you can.
It's an engineering system.
Right.
You think biochemistry because that's your brain, right?
Yeah. So, and like you said, there's a whole kind of community of detoxers, like people.
And some of them are weird, man. Green juice detox. That's not detox, dude.
Right. Yeah. And, but it looks like a common theme is using binders and things like activated charcoal, like you said, and some other ones. And that makes a lot of sense to me. There's Garrett Smith has this toxic bile theory where he basically thinks of toxins being stored in the liver and then the liver dumping those toxins into the bile. And then the bile goes to the gallbladder and then the intestines. But then once it gets to the intestines, it has two options. It could either go out in the poop or it could get reabsorbed. And so
there's genetic evidence for that thing. People with the HLA-DR4 haplotype tend to get toxic mold. And it's because the lipophoric toxins, the ones that dissolve into fat, if you have those genes, your body holds on to bile because you're more famine resistant. If you don't have those genes, you tend to just poop your bile out and then make new. And so one of the portions of a chapter in my big nutrition book was about how do you increase bile flow for toxin elimination because you got to get them out. Just because I had very large toxins and we had mercury and lead and toxic mold at very high levels and lots of bad things. So I look at it as like a differential equation. Like, okay, what is the rate that toxins are entering the body, right? And then what is the rate they're leaving the body? And unfortunately, it's a complex equation because each type of toxin, well, it's hard to measure the rate going in, but the rate of excretion is dependent on what you're eating, when you eat it, and whether you're in a sauna or not, and your genetics. And so I'm just like, if you say, all right, this is how it actually works, what in practice, increase bile flow, sequester bile, take a lot of things that help your body transform toxins so that they can be excreted, bind the crap out of them. And then between the bindings, you're going to have to restore all the good stuff that you bound. So it's like you pulse it, and I've been doing that for 25 years and I don't weigh 300 pounds and I don't have all the diseases of aging like fibromyalgia and all this stuff. But that's why I like your model. Because at least for me, I think increasing the rate of excretion was an important component. But what I've seen over all this time, your model is very accurate where less toxins, less cancer. And it doesn't have to be a specific toxin. It's just the load because the body will stick any of them in a tumor.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so I think that there's definitely a role for detox protocols in treating cancer. And I think that, like you said, the conventional wisdom, which makes a lot of sense, is using things like binders and also trying to increase the flow of bile. And there's various strategies. I've heard people talk about coffee enemas and other kinds of sort of strategies. I'm not.
You've never tried a coffee enema?
No, I never tried it.
Okay, here's a hint. Cool it off first. Okay, just it's like here's the data on that. Yeah. It does cause a brief increase in glutathione in the liver, and it does cause your body to squirt out a bunch of bile. In terms of medical literature, most of them about bowel perforations. So some of the doctors that I really trust swear by it. I've done probably 5 or 6 when I was really desperate in my late 20s. I love coffee. This is caffeine tattooed on my arm. But man, I just get too wired from that. So I just don't think it's worth the mess, for lack of a better word. But some people, like, if it works for you, cool. But there's probably easier ways. Like, if you want to get rid of your bile, take cholestyramine. Like, that sticks to bile like no one's business. And all the toxins in bile, and that's the primary detoxer for mold toxins. But it doesn't do much for metals, right?
Yeah.
And so we haven't talked much about what to eat. I know we're coming up to the end of the show. You said you're primarily carnivores. Are you saying that meat is the lowest toxin food?
Well, ruminant meat in particular looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I didn't bring up the fact that seed oils have a toxin called linoleic acid in them. And linoleic acid can be present to some degree in non-ruminant animal fat, more so than, because, pigs, for example, fed corn and soy, we'll get some more of that linoleic acid. And so, but consistently, beef tends to stay low in linoleic acid.
Grass-fed beef is 1.6% linoleic acid. So this is one of those times where linoleic acid, is it a toxin? It's an essential it's an essential fat. So it's only toxic at the levels that we're eating it at. And it's the same thing with some of the other things that we need. You need a little bit of selenium, but too much selenium increases cancer risk and becomes a toxin and gets sequestered in tumors, right? So, but to your point, I would also say glucose is the primary thing that moves our blood sugar, that moves our mitochondria. And if your blood sugar was 0, you would probably be dead.
Sure.
So like both sugar and linoleic acid are toxic at the doses they're used at today, yet they're essential at lower doses. And because this is going to overcome a lot of the people, the naysayers. And it's like you can acknowledge there are levels and things only become toxic at a certain point. And what do we know though about linoleic acid in cancer tumors? Is it overstored? Is it represented there?
Absolutely.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
So this is interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want that soybean oil, guys.
Yeah. So technically, like you said, in excess, it can act as a toxin. It undergoes a process called lipid peroxidation. That's where it produces tons of these reactive oxygen species. And it's actually a chain reaction. So like the whole population of the linoleic acid molecules become ROS through a chain reaction. But in any case, as a toxin, in my theory, you would expect cancer cells to kind of sequester and hoard it. And sure enough, they do. They actually dramatically upregulate their fatty acid transporters on their cell surface to pull it in. And so it's actually not passive, it's active. So, and sure enough, medical research shows that cancer cells are packed full of seed oils. They've found them at high concentrations, and they're actually not used for any purpose. They're stored inside of lipid droplets. So there's these balls of seed oils that are just floating around the cytoplasm of cancer cells.
Wow.
And believe it or not, those lipid droplets are not in normal tissue. So they've actually looked at normal brain tissue. And normal brain tissue has no lipid droplets, but brain tumor tissue is packed full of lipid droplets.
It's just trying to shed the omega-6. Wow.
Yeah. So the lipid droplets are just balls of seed oils that are floating around, as well as other lipophilic toxins like microplastics and forever chemicals. They store them in the same droplets.
Wow.
Yeah.
You want another toxin that's going to just drive people nuts? Oleic acid. Olive oil.
Olive oil, yeah.
Now, this is one of the things, guys, I do 2 ounces of olive oil in the average day because there's great evidence it's good for you. But excessive oleic acid increases the rate of oxidation of omega-6 oils by about 5x via something called D5D, which is an enzyme that it upregulates. So maybe only having olive oil is a bad idea, or even having too much of it. So I can tell you, after now 20 plus years of doing this, I eat tallow, I eat butter, I only eat animal fats, and I eat some avocados, and I eat occasional macadamias. I don't anymore eat most nuts. I'll have some walnuts on occasion, but it's rare. And I'll eat 2 ounces of olive oil, and maybe I'll eat fish like sushi, but like. I've been doing this for 25 years. I have no diffuse soft plaque. I have no evidence of cancer tumors. Sean Amara was on, a physician, a couple of weeks ago, and he looked at my whole body MRI and said, Dave, of any influencer I've ever measured, you have the best fat deposition. You have no fat in your muscles whatsoever at all. He said, this is exceptionally rare. And the same thing around the heart and all. I have maybe too lean under my skin. I can deal with that. But what you're talking about here, it actually works. But I know that if I cranked up my olive oil, that the naturally occurring omega-6s that I get from my tallow, very small amounts, that's going to become 5 times more oxidative, right? So like this toxin lens is so useful. I've never heard of oleic acid being overrepresented in tumors. Have you?
I haven't looked into that one
Okay.
yet. So I'll check it out. As soon as I get home, I'll check it out.
It might be too high of a dose in order to really count as a toxin the way we're talking about it. Like we said, water's toxic. You can drown in it, or you can wash out all your minerals. But it gets very metabolically complex and interesting. But your theory is a way for people to think about, what would I do if I had cancer? Well, you have toxins if you have cancer. It's there always. So you'd want to lower the toxic burden. And if this theory holds water, you should be able to track your tumor shrinking. And I'd like to offer a PSA. If you decide to do any cancer therapy, whether it's Western or it's alternative, you must track the progression of the size of your tumor. I have far too many people I know, some I know and some I have known because they passed, who said, I'm just going to wish it away. And then they stopped measuring whether their wishes were working. Don't do that. If you have cancer, you should track the cancer and do everything in your power, whatever intuitively and scientifically feels right, whatever your care team says, but track it. And getting rid of toxins is a damn good idea because it's likely that that thing is full of it. Now, my final question. Have you ever seen a Western hospital biopsy a tumor and return with a toxicology report?
No, not really.
No, they don't.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, huh?
Right. What I will say, though, is everything that I've said today is backed up by medical research literature, actual studies that have found high levels, like I mentioned.
Yeah, it's real. Yeah.
Oxalates, aluminum, heavy metals, those are all found in high concentrations. Microplastics, forever chemicals. There's real medical literature saying that they're in high levels inside of cancer tumors.
So there's a clear case, and you've done a great job of writing about this and talking about it. Maybe tumors are just dumpsters. Right. So you got to take out the trash. I love this model. And thank you for coming on the show and taking time out of your busy future of computing life to talk about toxins, because I'd love to live for at least 180 years to take advantage of all the computing stuff you're going to build. So keep it up.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, man. It's been a great pleasure.
Absolutely.
See you next time on the Human Upgrade Podcast.